So, hello everyone. So for the review for object-oriented programming COP 3330, we are going to have on the things that we have uploaded for the review sessions on the website that's on Study Union for the COP 3330 Spring 2018. So let's go for the first one. Like, the operators are the special symbols that perform the specific operation on up to how many operands. So for the operands, like, the operators can be anything that can operate the systems. It can be your plus, minus, multiplications. These things usually go for the two operands, but when we go for our operators, there is one more operator known as ternary operator. The ternary operators go for the three of them. So for this part, I will choose the option C. Whereas if I go down, it's saying regarding the operator precedence, which of the following will be evaluated first? Equals to, I believe it goes in the end, multiplication, plus, instance of, and plus plus. I think so. The plus plus operator, that is your prefix operator, goes the first, then the any other of them. Then it says what is the purpose of the assignment operator. The assignment operator, it usually assigns the value on the left to the right of the operator on the right, and the assignment the value on the right to the operand of the left to check the equalities, to check the identical. I think so. To check the identical, we have dot equals operator, and for the checking the equality, we have double equals to operator. So I think it assigns the value from the right to left, because if we what do is assign the value from my right hand to the left hand side. So for this part, I will go for this one. Yep. Next, it says, the plus operator performs two operations. Which of the following is true? The plus operator. Okay, it's the assignments, concatenations, additions, A and C and B and C. The plus operator, we know the plus operator doesn't assign the things, it adds the things. So the addition is one of them. And we know it also when we are using the concatenation of the strings, when we have two strings and we use the plus operator, it concatenates them. So as a result, for this thing, I will go for the option number B and A and B, C. And says, how many operators do unary operator require? The unary operators is, by the definition says, the operator that is being applied only on the one operand itself. So the operands required for the unary operator is only one. Then it says, regarding the conditional operators, that is, and or what does the short circuiting behavior means? Both the operands expression are evaluated, only the second operand expression is evaluated, only the first operand expression is evaluated, the second operand expression is evaluated only if needed, or none of the above. So I will go for the it's not necessarily only the first operand expression is evaluated, or this, because if the first is true and we have an AND operator, it will calculate the both of them. But if the first is true and it's the OR operator, it won't calculate anything on the second part. So I will go for the second operator evaluation is evaluated only if it is needed. We have, what does the instance operator do? Instance of, so test if the compared operators are equal, test if the compared operators are identical, test if the expression is true, and test if the expression is false, and test if the object is the instance of a class, superclass, or implements an interface. Yeah, I think so. The instance of operator is usually for when we have the inheritance and we have the multiple classes from the same superclass. That's why it is to test the operand when it is from the subclass, implements an interface, or it is from the instance of another class. A and Comprise variable operators and the method invocations. We have expressions, statement, abstract class, class, and interface. A dash comprise of the variables, operators, and the method invocations. So a statement consists of an expressions. But an expression is what makes a statement. So I will go for the expression one for this one. The abstract class and the interface are the difference. So and forms a complete unit of execution to include the terminating semicolon, that is expression statements, declaration statements, abstract class, and the class interface. So it's when we have an expression and we include a semicolon in that, it becomes a statement. So for this part, it is an expression statement. We have and declares a value. So for a variable that is being declared, we have an expression statements, declaration statements, a class, or an interface. For this part, we know whatever declares a variable is a declaration statement. So this thing goes for the declaration statements. And we have what is the used in the programming to block a group of the zeros or the more executable statements. For a block statements and everything like that, we have a block statements like the block commands with the curly brackets. For that reason, we don't have an angular brackets, we don't have parentheses, we don't have square brackets, we don't have a block comments. So it is this. What is the purpose of the control flow statements? For the control flow statements is the same that we use for our loops, for our sequence, for our if-else, so that we can control how the flow needs to be run on a particular algorithm in a program. So it says to allow the programs to run sequentially, to allow the program to run line by line from top to bottom, to allow program to run with the break of the execution of flow, all of the above and none of the above. So if we are trying to run anything in a particular flow that we can control, I would go for it may run for the by the break, because it cannot run everything from the sequentially, because it can break depending on the thing. If we have an if and else, or if we have any other break or continues, and it cannot be on top to bottom, because if there is a loop, it is going to run again and again the same line of code multiple times. Again, if a programmer writes a control flow statements, if else, are they required to include an else leg? It is not required to include the last else leg, because if you have an if, it is not necessary to have an else. But if you have an else, then it is necessary that you should have an if. So for this part, I will go for a no. It says, if a programmer writes a control flow statement using switch, are they required to indicate the default case label? The answer for this thing stays no, because if there is nothing that you create, the Java will create something for you, and it doesn't state anything to do, so it won't state anything at all in there. So answer for this thing is no. So regarding the classes, instance variables are, so for the classes or any instance variable that we don't define is a non-static by default, because if until and unless we define it is a static, it won't be a static. Everything is a non-static. Regarding classes, class variables are, I think that this is the that the instance variable is a non-static and the class variables is a static, because the instance variable, it is when we have created the instance at a particular time, for example in the method or things, and when the class variables is the one that we have done the outside the class, so they are the static ones. So the local variable stores permanent, no, it can't store permanent, is a static. Static is the only one, but they can be a local then. An instant state, no. It is a temporary state. Yes, a local variable is always one of the temporary state. So it is a temporary. The parameters are different than the arguments because parameters are used when a method or constructor is defined, a method or constructor is called, a class is defined, an interface is defined, and the abstract class is defined. When we are using parameters, that is different than the arguments because the parameters are used when the method of a constructor, when the method or a constructor is defined, and the arguments are the one that are being used when the method or constructor is called. Like if I am calling something, the thing that is passed, they are the arguments, and the thing that is receiving when we are defining, they are the parameters, because the parameters are received and the arguments are passed to the variable. Next, we have variable naming has rules associated with it. Which of the following is true? They can start with a number, they can start with a special character, they can include white space, all of the above or none of the above. A variable name can start with a number. No, we know a variable name cannot start with the number. The naming convention of a variable name is it should start with an alphabet or an underscore. They can start with any special character. No, not any special character. They can start with particular special character like underscore. They can start with this white space. They can include a white space. If any times we have a white space in the variable names, then it is not a good practice because the compiler will get mad on us and it will give some compilation error on that point. So answer for this thing is none of the above. In the object-oriented terms, what is the use as a blueprint to a model of a real-world object? Method, state, behavior, constant, or class. A method is always a part of the class, so method tells how a thing needs to be done. State, behavior, and the constant and behavior are the part of the method or the variable, that how it is going to react, how it is going to stay, and the constants is the one that is going to be same as forever for the time. So I will go for the classes for this reason. Like the classes, they will stay forever. Like they says, hey, this is the blueprint, this is going to be stamped, this is how it is going to be saved. We have object-oriented programming allow for the inheritance. So commonly used state and the behavior can be reused. The class that is inherited from is the dash and the new class is the dash. So it's saying the object-oriented programming allows the inheritance. Yes, we know the object-oriented programming is mainly based on the inheritance. That's why it is different from the procedural programming. So commonly used state and the behavior can be reused. The class that is inherited from the thing that is inherited from is known as the superclass. So everything is inherited from the superclass, and the new class is a subclass. So subclass inherits a thing from the superclass. So for this reason, I will go for this one. We have how many classes can be subclass extend when using the inheritance in the object-oriented programming using a Java programming languages. So when we are inheriting something, there can be only one superclass of a subclass, whereas there can be many subclasses of a superclass. Like a superclass can have multiple subclasses, but a subclass will only and only have one superclass. So I will go for the one for this reason. Whereas there can be a multiple level of the inheritance, like one class is inheriting the other, that one is inherited by the other one, and so on. When using the inheritance, what does the new class inherits when it is derived from the another class? So whenever we have an inheritance, it inherits each and everything from the classes. Like irrespective, we have are all the behaviors, all the states, all the variables and everything in the class. I will go for the state behavior. I won't go for the object of the class because the class is different, the blueprint, and the object is an actual variable of the real state in real life variable in the your RAM. The inheritance and the interface, the function methods, and the project and the package, because the project and the package contain the class, not the class contain the project and the package. Everything inside the class is being inherited when it is derived from the another class. When implementing an interface in object-oriented programming, all blank must be included into the source code of the class to compile. So it's like state and behavior, superclass, constructor, and the method. Like when we are implementing an interface in the object-oriented programming, all the method that is included must be compiled in the source code so that we can know, hey, this is the error, or this is the thing that's not working. So it's an expression statement forms a complete unit of the execution with the terminating semicolon. The following code is an correct example of an expression in a game is equals to new game and semicolon. If we see here, we have this game. This is my class name. This is an object for that game. The two have the same different names, like different spellings, like the capital G and the small g. There is a difference in them. We assign them with using a new. Whenever we call new and we have a game and we're calling a constructor with that and followed by a semicolon. So if we have a definition of a constructors in my source code, so it is a correct spelling. If not, the Java will create a constructor without any default parameters in there. So the answer for this thing is true. Like yes, this is a correct statement. Next one. Does the following includes all the required components of a class definition? We have a public class, new class, and the curly brackets in this. If one is yes, there's no, it's missing the field and the required methods. If we have a class, it is not necessary that we need to have fields or the methods. Second, no, it's SS modifiers is not required. Because the SS modifiers is the public, private, and the protected or the package protected, we don't need access modifiers if we don't have any variables, as they are not necessary. So this is not necessary. And the public thing here, if it is there, it is fine. If it is not, it is not fine. It is also fine, because if it is not there, it is a package protected, package private. Else it is and private if it is not there. No, it is missing the return type. Return type is usually for your methods, that it should return this kind of method, or it should be something that it should be returned or not. But a class, it is a blueprint, so it is not necessary it is going to return something or not. It is missing the parentheses and the parameter list. If a class doesn't have any parameters, it is not going to have any parameters list. So I will go for this one for the yes. It's saying, what are the components of a method declaration that comprise the method signature? So it has the method return type and the method name. We have the method return type and the method parameter list, method return type, method name, method parameter list. And we have method name, method parameter list, and the all of the above. So what the components that is required for the method signature is the method name, what it should have, and what are the parameter list is. I don't care for the signature, like what it should contains or what it should return type, but the parameter list, yes, it should have all the parameters list and what is the name, how the method is being called. So does the following code includes all the required component of this for a method declaration? Void this method with the parenthesis and the curly brackets. As we know, we are assuming it is inside certain class, so we don't need to worry about this thing, like there is need to be inside some class. So it's saying It is missing an access modifier, no. If it is not specifying anything, it is a package private. Second thing, it is saying no, it is missing the return type. Yes, there is a return type, that's void. Void is a valid return type we have, so this thing is wrong. It's saying it's missing the parameter list. There is nothing in the parameter, so it is a void parameter list. So it is also one of the valid reason, like it's saying that that's wrong, like for missing a parameter list, but there is a parameter list, that's nothing. It's missing the argument list. Argument list, if you remember, we tell that arguments are the one that is being passed as an argument and received as a parameter. So it need not to be have an argument list. So I will go for it like it is one of the correct statement. It's saying which of the following are the type of the class member variable. We have a fields, we have a local variables, we have a parameters, we have the all of the above and none of the above. So for the class member variables, it need not to be have the fields. Yes, it need to be have fields. They can also be a local variables. They can also be a parameters. So for these things, I will go that it is for the all of the above. And the object-oriented concept of the software reuse allow a class to be created once and used blank. So it's saying the object-oriented scope of a software reuse allows a class to be created once and used never. No, it can be used more than that. Once unless it is extended using inheritance. No, even if it is inherited, we can use it again as many times as desired to include the extending it to the using inheritance. Like yes, we can use it as much as we want. We don't need to be a specific type. 10 times of less now. Once unless it is implemented using the interface. All right. If a class explicitly declares a constructor that takes 0 to n parameters when instantiated, what happened to the default constructor of the class? If we have a function method, like if we have a method with the same name but a different parameters, like if it has no parameters and then we have one more constructor with one parameters, it is going to do things. Yes, the previous one stays, but it also has the one with the n parameters. So it's saying like it, and for the default parameter that the class generates, so it is going to be have it is does not exist, but it still exists if we have created by our own self. Like if we have explicitly created the one without any default parameters, it won't exist. But if we have made one explicitly from 0 to n, the one that was previously is going to be gone off. It doesn't exist anymore. When does a method returns a code that invokes it? Completes all the statements in the method, reaches a return statement, throws an exception A or B, A, B or C. If a method doesn't has any return type, it's void. It is going to be return something when it is going to complete all these statements. So A, it's right. Reaches a return statement. While completing the code, if it reaches some return statement, it won't compile, it won't run anything beyond that. So it will stop immediately. As a result, as long as it reaches a return statement, it will terminate, it will return an invoke. So B is also true. Now it's in C, throws an exception. If there is something you says 5 divided by 0 and you're trying to do something like that, that's an illegal operation. So it will returns an exception, it will throws an exception. As a result, it won't allow you to perform anything further. So it is going to go for the A, B or C. Now we have what is the automatically access modifier of the methods or the fields of an interface. So for this thing we have the package public, package private and the protected. The automatically access modifiers of a method or the field of an instance, it is mostly the public. because if everything is not there, it is going to be public everywhere in there. What does the keyword final indicate regarding the methods or the field members of a class? If we have some final keyword over there, it means like they cannot be modified. It is like a constant that is going to be same throughout our program or throughout our project. Like it is never going to be changed. Like they cannot be modified, they are private, they are public, they are modifiable, none of the above. I would go for the they cannot be modified, because they are the final, like they are never going to be changed throughout the program. If there are an unknown number of parameters being passed to a method, or a software developer can use a construct called varx, an array, an array list, a 2D array, or none of the above. And 2D array and the array list are the one of the same kind. Like if we have a number of parameters we don't know, we cannot have the parameters passed differently. Like each variable, they are integers, characters and things, and they are passed without something, and they don't have a limit. They cannot be stated into the array and the array list unless they are on the same types and combined within an array itself. So I will go for the varx, because varx can be something that can have unlimited amount or ample amount of parameters that you don't know how many it is going to have. A ternary operator takes 3 operand and uses a colon and a question mark notation. That's ternary operator. What control the structure does the ternary operator mimic? So if we have a ternary operator, we have something question mark, and then we have 1 or 2. So let's say if we have A question mark B colon C, if A is true, it is going to return us B. If A is true, it is going to do whatever the C says. So it is a duplicate or replica of an if and else, because it is not going to loop itself. It is not going for the switch, because there are only 2 cases like an if and else. So it is not going to be loop, for loop, or do while loop, or any other loops. Regarding the object-oriented programming, declaration means that a variable name is associated with the object type and creates an object of that type. So if we are talking about the object-oriented programming, the declaration doesn't mean it is going to be associated with the object type that it has been created. So answer for this thing is in false, because there the variable name is associated with the variable name can be anything. It doesn't need not to be just specified like, hey, it is an int, so it need to be an int number. So it can be anything else. It can also be created to the type, the object it is. When a method parameters have the same name as a class field, that is repetitions, duplications, same name, shadowing, or confusion. It is not going to have a same name, duplication, replication. The method parameters have the same name. It is known as the shadowing. Like we have a same thing with other class fields that we have. They both have the same thing. So we need to use the this dot operator for such scenarios. When having a programmatically differentiate a parameter having the same name as a field of the class, what keyword can resolve the issue when the compiler, when setting the field equals to the argument value passed through into the method? It is the one of the thing that I just stated in the above question, like when we have a shadowing, when the things is going to be like a same class member name and the things in the parameter list, we are going to use the this dot keyword. So this keyword is the what we are going to use in such scenarios when we have a shadowing. We have the regarding object-oriented programming. When an object is instantiated, the keyword new is used, memory is allocated, and a reference to that memory is returned. So whenever we use the new keyword, it allocates the memory inside your RAM, and it returns the initial point to that, and it allocates to that variable that however it has been assigned by the equal to operator. So yes, it is going to give us the reference of that variable, so it is going to be used like that. An interface can or should be instantiated. It need not be an interface can should be instantiated, or it can be instantiated, but we can create a variable of an a variable of an interface, but it cannot be instantiated with the interface. It need to be instantiated with some class that is going to extend that interface or implement that interface. So it is saying a method in the object-oriented programming can return primitive data types dash or dash. So primitive data types is usually your int, char, float, strings, and things like that. Or it can also return some other class, or it can also return some other interface, because interface is just an representation of a class that is going to be implemented in your code. So for this reason, it is going to be a class and the interface. The keyword this is used to reference the inheritance, the interface, the subclass, the current object, or the class destructor. The this operator means the very this object we are working with. It doesn't mean the one I'm inheriting, the subclass it has. It means the current object I am working with. So for this thing, it is the current object. So we have the operators with the high precedence are evaluated blank, operators with the relatively dash precedence. So if the operator with the high precedence are usually evaluated before, because they have a high precedence, than the one that has the low precedence. So I will go for the one that is they have been evaluated before than the lower. And we have, when defining a class in Java programming language, a software developer can extend dash superclass and implements dash interfaces. So whenever we have we just talked like how many superclass a subclass can have. A subclass can have only one superclass. It need not to be like more than 2 or 3, but a superclass can have one subclass. So for this thing, it is like one subclass, and it can implement unlimited interfaces. Like we can implement ample amount of the interfaces as much as I want. A class that uses an explicit constructor invokes users to use the keyword this to call the another constructor in the same class, call the super constructor, use the recursion and call itself, call another constructor in the different class, call the constructor in the implement interface. I will go for the call the another constructor in the same class, because this operator is going to be used for that. If you're calling this dot the same constructor, it is going to be an infinite loop that is not going to be end anyhow. So we need to be calling another constructor in that the same class with the same object. Name a method that has when a method has a return type other than the void, what data type can be returned from that method? If we have a void, we know it is not going to return anything. It is going to be stay same. So it's saying that the return type, no return value is required. The return type can be any data type valid in the Java programming language. The return type must match the declared return type, and the return type should be a string. We don't need to, like, if we don't know anything, it can be string now. If it is an int, it is need to be an int. If we have a return type that is saying it should be an char, it should match the declared return type, whatever we are returning. So I will go for the return type must match their declared return type because it is other than the void. What allows for the methods to have the same name but the different method signatures in the object-oriented programming. If we have a same name and we have a different method signatures, it is usually known as the method overloading because they are of the same type, but the difference is just their parameters are different. So they cannot be in class overriding or method overriding. They are the method overloading. We have what differentiates method with the same name in the class. If we have a same name in a class, the differentiation is there the parameters type because the return types depending on the things. We cannot say, hey, if it is running an int, give me this parameter, call that this method, or if it is running a char, call that method. No, the return types depends which kind of constructor or which type of method are we calling. So it is then kind of a parameters list that decides which kind of parameters are we calling. The return type doesn't decide that thing. For the access level modifiers, do not define how other class can reference a field or invoke the methods. And access level modifiers do not define how the other class can reference. So if, for example, if we have something private, it is going to decide, yes, the other class is not going to use it. If it is protected, yes, it is going to decide like, yes, the other class is going to use it. So the access modifiers, yes, they do decide like which class or which method is going to be used by which of them, or if it's public, then the object can use. If it's not public, the object cannot be used. So for this thing, it says do not define, so that's false. Yes, it did define. A class can have multiple constructors. Yes, that's true. We can have, as we have a method overloading, we can have a constructor overloading that can decide a class can have a multiple constructors, like one without any parameters, like that's our basic constructor. Ones with multiple parameters can have the parameterized constructor or the copy constructor that copies from the another object. Encapsulation of class fields hides implementation details. How is the encapsulation used to access the fields of a class? Private methods are written to interact with the private fields. Public methods are written to interact with the public fields. Private methods are written to interact with the public fields. And the public methods are written to interact with the private fields. And none of the above. Encapsulation is not real. For the encapsulation, we say it's a binding up of data into one single unit. We use the private methods so that we can interact with the private fields, so that because we know private fields we cannot access directly through an object. We need some sort of, we can only access a public method. So I will go for the public methods are written to interact with any public or the private fields, but most of them, the main reason is for your private field, for your private fields. Oh no. Okay. In an object-oriented programming, classes, keywords, methods, variables, and the interface are not case sensitive. Yes, Java is a case sensitive language. For this thing, it's saying it is not a case sensitive. I would say it is false. What is the key difference between an if-else, and a switch control flow statement? We know an if-else, if we need to go to the worst case, it is going to take ample amount of time. Like it is going to check first if, then the second if, and the third if, so on. It is going to go till the end for the else. But whereas for the switch flow control, it is going to be jumped directly to the statement we want to jump. There another difference, the switch cases can only check for a particular value, like they cannot check if a value is less than 5 or greater than 5. It checks if the value is 5, it is going to be applicable on the switch, but it doesn't check if it is less than 5, it cannot be applicable on that. So it says switches stop evaluating when the field, when it finds a true conditions. If else stop evaluating when it finds the true conditions, both evaluate when it finds a true conditions. If else continues evaluating after it finds the true conditions, and none of the above. I will call for the if else stop evaluating when it finds the true conditions, because the if else is still going to use those things. Like switch stops find directly that location, but the if else will only stop when it finds the true condition, else it will go to the else. So it's saying regarding the file path, there are two options, absolute or relative. Which of the following is true? Absolute never includes a root elements and the complete directory list required to access the file. The relative needs to be combined with the another path to access the file. The absolute needs to be combined with the another path to access the file. The relative always include the root elements, and complete directory list include to the access files. For this one, I will go for the relative needs to be combined with the another path of the access fields, because if we have something, it is the relative to the one what we are using with the current path. So that's why the relative fields is known as the relative, as the absolute need to be find exactly from the root elements and go from them. So we have a little code here that says public static void main string args. So it's kind of a main. We have system.out.println welcome to Boga, j option pane dot show message dialog box null. Let's play Bogie. And we have read data file, data is equals to new read data files, data file name data.population, and we have data file directly is equals to read file direct the dictionary file name dictionary.populate data, and we have board is equals to new board, and data.get data and directory.get data, board.populate device and system.out.println. There are directory get data.size entries in the directories. So given the source code, where is the method populate dice defined? So populate dice is being called by the board, and we know board is being defined is an object of class board. So it is going to be defined inside the class board. So in the class read data file, no. In the Java API, no. In the interface board, no. Because we know Java and the class interface board, these two are kind of tricky. It can be an interface, it cannot be an interface, but the definition is never in the interface, it is always in the class. Whereas here we are saying board is equals to new board, and I told before, like an interface cannot be instantiated. Only an object can be created, but it cannot be instantiated. So board is a class, it is not an interface. So I will go for in the class board. Given the source code above, where is the read data file name? What is the read data file? So this is the read data file, and the read data file, and this thing dictionary file name. So according to this thing, the read data file is a class that is being made by the system itself, but where the read data file and the data file name, this thing is an constructor that we are calling with one parameter is known as the data file. So I will go for it is an kind of custom constructor, because it is not an destructor. There is no such thing as a maker or default constructor or no argument constructor. Given the source code above, what is the J option pane message dialog box null? Let's play Bogie. So for this thing, it is a kind of an method, because a J option pane, it is a class. We know a class has a method known as show message dialog, and whenever we are able to call something directly from the class, means it is a static member, it is a static member of that class. That's why we are able static and the public method member of that class. That's why we are able to use it directly from the class name, not by an object. So I will go for this thing as a static method because it is static and the public method, because it is it cannot be non-static. If it's non-static, I need to create an object. It cannot be an instance method because we are not instantiating anything. We are not calling a class method because it is a static by specifically. Given the source code above, what does the method signature public static void main string args can be changed? We know it is and required for your Java machines that your static main need to be looks like their main should be a public, it should be a static because it needs to be only one, and it should have a strings arrays of an argument, like what kind of argument it isn't going to be passed. So I will go for no. It is required by the JVM, that's a Java machine. So we have given the source code regarding the public static void main. What is the ARGS? The ARGS we know stands for the arguments that whatever we are passing, and whatever we usually do is to pass them for the local variables, like for the command line arguments. Let's say the member variable, no, it is not a member variable of that class. Is it an instance variable? No, it is not an instance variable of that class. Is it a primitive data type? No, it is also not a primitive data type, but yes, it is a local variable. Yeah, it is a local variable within the main method that can be altered anytime throughout your code, but it is usually what contains your command line arguments in there. We have given the source code above. What is the read data file? So let's go above, see the code. We have a read data file, this thing, read data file data, and we are doing new read data file. So we told that it is a class. So read data file is a class. It cannot be an interface because we are assigning it to a something known as a read data file. Like this thing is equals to new read data file. So that's why it is cannot be an interface. It is going to be a class. Now, given the source code above, what are the data and the dictionaries? Here, if we see, the data and the dictionary are the objects of the read data file. Data is for the data file and the dictionary is for the dictionary file name. So for this thing, I will go for then objects or an reference objects. Here we have some other code. Okay, public interface IDIE, public class final int, number of sites 6, public void data display letters, public void add letters, string letters, and public void roll die. So first of all, we know that an interface does not have the definitions. Interface can only contains your signatures, like what is going to be there and what should it looks like and things like that. Definition is been implemented wherever the interface is being implemented in some classes. Let's say given the source code above in the IDE, what is IDIE? So that's your interface, we know that. So I will go for it is an interface. It is stated it is an interface. What is the source code above? What is number of sites? We know number of sites is an integer and it is a final. So final means it is going to be constant forever. It is static, means I can use anywhere with the IDIE dot number of sites. So it is a static and a constant, and it is publicly available, and it is an integer that has a value 6. So I will go for this thing and say it is a constant. Excuse me. So we here given the source code above, what should the method include about method body. So it says the method body, as we told, that interface only have the signatures, they don't have the definitions. So now interface don't include the method bodies. Given the source code above, can a programmer instantiate an instance of interface IDE? As we don't have a definition, even if a programmer tries to instantiate anything, the compiler will give an error saying, hey, you cannot do that because it is not complete yet. So for this thing, it is going to be no. We have another code that's public class die implements IDIE. So IDIE is being implemented by the class die. So it's like the public Arraylist letters goes to new Arraylist. We are overriding the function. So whatever was there in IDIE, we are implementing everything here, but we are overriding everything for that. For example, the display letters, the add letters, and the roll die. We have 4 string values, the whatever in there, system.out with these values. We are adding the values to the letters, and we are here throwing the exception like not yet supported yet. Given the source code above, what is it called when a class implements an interface such as in die implements IDE? This kind of thing is known as an inheritance, because die is inheriting your IDIE. So that's why it is an inheritance, because it is extending, it is implementing the things that is already been there. Given the source code above, where was the method signature public string roll die defined? The public string roll die was already as a signature in the interface, but it was defined in the class die itself. So it was like where was the method signature? The method signature was in the interface ID. Given the source code above, can a method signature public void add letter string letter be modified in the class die? It's saying the signature can be modified, but it will be on a different scale. But we need to have those things as a same, because it is been implemented already as a same in there. So I will go for this thing as saying no, it cannot be modified because it is implementing exactly the same interface we have over there. Now it's saying given the source code above, where is the method dot add letters in the code defined? And if we see here, it is then letters dot add letters, and here the letter is an array list, and array list is adding that thing. So it has been pretty much defined in the array list class itself. That is one of the Java's things. So in the interface ID, no. In the Java API for the class Arraylist, yes, it has been defined in the Java API of your Arraylist class. Then we have, given the source code above, what type of the looping is being used in the expression for string value letters? And we have we see here is string value and the letter. It is not a traditional for loop. For the traditional for loop is where we go for int I is equals to 0 and things like that. So it is an enhanced for loop. Yes, it is an enhanced for loop because it says it cannot be while or do because of this keyword for. So it is an enhanced for loop in which it is going to implement the things like if for all the values, for all the strings in the each particular indexes of the letters, it is going to implement the same thing in there. Given the source code above, what data type of the object can be added to the ArrayList members variable letters? So for them, we have an array list members, the variable letters. If we are adding something, it need to be of a kind of strings, because if you see here above, your letters is an array list of string that we have defined specifically. Like, yes, it is going to be an of letters of strings. So if we are adding something, it needs to be of the same data type. That's the definition of an array list. Now we have the content pane of a top level container. That's your JFrame, dialog box, JApplet is the container where the root panes, visible components are compromised, excluding, in a JFrame and all the top level containers, they contain a JPanel, they contain a JLabels, they contain a JButtons, but it doesn't contain a J menu bar. So for this thing, it is the menu bar, because the menu bar is something that's on your very top that states where to do the things, like where to go. An action listener is equivalent to an event handler. An event handler is what we are doing when there is a certain event and we need to do the stuff like that. But yes, the action listener is going to implement the things, that how the things is going to be done. So yes, it is true. When writing an action listener, there are specific steps that should be followed. Select the correct combination of this step. Declare an event handler class that implements the action listener interface. Yes, we can do that. It's a register an interface of an defined event handler class on one or the more components. Yes, we can do that. We can implement the same instance of the class on one or more components where the event handling is done. Third thing, ensure that the class that implements the interface action listener includes the method public, void action performed, action event E. Yes, we need to ensure every time that if we are declaring a class, we are having a stuff that has that thing, this method must be implemented in there for the action listener, because if it is not going to be implemented, the system won't be know what thing should be performed if this thing is happened or if something is happened. So for this reason, I would go for A, B, and C. The Java X Swing and the Java X Swing.event or the Java or the Swing API has 18 public packages that group features for the developing user interfaces. This is known as the part of the Java 2D API, the Visual Studio, and the UIP, that's the user interface package, or the Java Foundation class. I will go for this is a part of a Java Foundation class, because it is not a part of your Visual Studio, so the Java 2D API, because that's how your everything is going to be implemented in there. We have a J dialog box is one of the top 3 top level containers. Yes, that's true. The J dialog box is one of the top 3. One of them is J dialog box, another one is JPanel, and another one is JFrame. The grid bag layout manager uses blank to specify the size and the proportion characteristics of a component. The grid layout is the one in which we used to create the grid and saying like there are 5 grid, like 5 by 5 rows, and these things is going to be in one set, the other row is going to be other sets. So is it to specify the size and the proportion of the characteristics of its component. So it usually use your grid bag constraints that specify like which type of things is going to be in there. Which Java programming language layout manager arranges the components into the rows and the columns using the equal sized and rectangular. That's a grid layout. Grid layouts do everything into the equal sizes. The border layouts set things on the border like the top, bottom, right or left, or in the center. The flow layout goes the things into the one particular flow, or the card layout sets the things like you can set one card active at the time. There can be many cards. The grid layout managers allows for the components to span multiple rows and the columns. Yes, we can span multiple rows and the column in the grid layout. We can combine them, we can merge them together in the grid layout so that we can create the things like, hey, this is the one grid, that's another one. We can select the different borders for them. When adding the components to a JPanel using the flow layout manager, how are the components placed if not specified? If anything is not specified, it is going to be placed from the left till the right. That's how the thing is going to be done in the order like how they were added. So this thing is from left to the right, how they were added. So it has which layout manager is the default layout for the class Java X swing.jpanel. We have for them is the flow layout, how the thing is need to be done, how the stuff is going to be done over there. The box layout allows the developer to do which of the following. The box layout sayings that put the components only in the side rows, on the columns are not an options. Force the components to display in equal size, align the components, and all of the above. I will go for like the box layout saying is to align the components into the one row so that it can be aligned into the one single thing. The grid layout. The grid layout is the most flexible layout manager as well as one of the most simple. Yeah, it's not the most simple one. It is the one of the complicated one, because the simple one I will go for is the box layout or the border layout that sets to the top, bottom, center, and the right and the left. Carved layouts allow us for the implementing an area that contains different components at the different times. I will go for like the card layout. Yes, it does assign the things like how it need to be assigned, like on the different areas, like components at the different times, and which one is going to be assigned and when. Two of the 6 layout managers provides and Java API were designed with the intent to use them with the GUIs builders. They are dash and dash. So for the GUI builder, we know the Java API that we use is usually the Spring layout and the group layout that sets the things, how the things needs to be gone. So we'll go for these things. Which layout manager is the default layout for the 3 top level containers in the Java X Swing packages? So for the 3 top level containers Java layout, we will go for the grid layout. That's one of the complexest. Flow layout goes in the straight, that doesn't use all of the 3s. I will go for the border layout, and that's the one that sets the things in there. When using the flow layout, if the width of the container is not wide enough to accommodate all the components in a single row, how does the layout manager respond? None of the components displays, starts a new rows, overlays the new components of the existing one, or none of the above. If it is not wide enough, it starts the new rows and the set the things into the new rows. Here we have a one layout. Let's say button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, and the button 5. Name the layout that places the component in the 5 specific areas. If the representation of the layout manager, I will go for the border layout for the scenarios, because we have a border page start, border page end, we have a border line start, line end, and the center one. we have a pop-up menu bar is blank until the user invokes the approximate commands to make it appear. So the pop-up menu bar is invisible, because if it is to you don't write the command like make it visible, it won't be visible. Until then it is usually invisible. It won't pop up things, like it will pop up, it won't be able to see it. Then it is to add a clickable buttons to the user interface. Java string J button is commonly used. Which of the following statement is true about the class J button? It says like, unlike the J menus class, the J button cannot use mnemonics. It's like, which of the following is true? That's not true. We have the J buttons class only allows to displaying the text on the button. No, we can also click on the buttons and do disable or enable the button. The J button can all have the automatic event handling associated with it when clicked. Now, it is not an automatic handling. We need to specify what it needs to be done. Then it has that the J button instance can display its text in a different place relative to its an image. Yes, that's one of those statements that is true, that the J button instance can display a text in a different place relative to its image. The purpose of writing an action listener is to define what code should be executed when the application fires the specific action events. The action listener is to, like, whenever a button or a menu bar is clicked, what should it do? That's what it should tell, like what this action event should be done. So this thing is true. Each of the three top level containers classes has a content pane that contains the visible components in its container user interfaces. That's true. Like all the three components contain what the things needs to be in there. The action performed this is the only method that is required to be implemented when implementing the action listener interface in the Java. That's true. Like the action listener is the only method that tells you that, hey, this action needs to be performed when this thing is clicked, or if something is happening, like this thing needs to be done only when you specify the action listener event and the action event as a parameter to that. The menus in the Java programming language are unique as they aren't placed with the other components in the user interfaces. That's also true. Like if they have in Java, like if the menus, they need to be performed in the same way. Like we need to be specified, need to be visible. Like they are unique. Like they are not placed normally. That they should be there or not. With the exception of the top three containers, all the swing components that start with the letter J descend from that's your J component class, because if we have anything that's the J component consists of everything that has been descended by them. Oops. So we have a picture here that's button 1, 2, 3, long name button 4 and the small 5. And we have a layout above displaying the left to right. For this one, as it is in the one go, I will go for this thing as a flow layout, because flow layout is the one that says go in the one flow. If we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for this layout above the display component in the row and the column, which component being the equal size and representing, I will go for the grid layout in such scenarios because they have been located as a grid. Then we have in the Java 2D API, an image is typically, so image is usually a rectangular 2-dimension array structure. Yes, an image consists of number from 0 to 255, I believe. that is all from integers that contains the what should be the pixel or what should be like the grayscale of that colors. It can be a 3 by 3 arrays like RBG depending on the things your image is like. Then each pixel represents the color at the position of that image. Yes, like each pixel when you zoom in the images, they all are the numbers of the images. When you shut down, they appears like an image. They are all the colors, like what should the color in there. All the dimensions represent the width and the height of the images. Yes, for a Java API, the 2D image is usually known as the width and the height. So it will be the all of the above. The image I/O was built in support for GIF, PNG, JPEG, BMP, WBMP. So yeah, the image I/O that we usually go is the one of them, that's GIF, PNG, JPEG, BMP, and the WPMP. Many swing components such as labels, buttons, tabs, pans can be decorated with an icon. Yeah, we know many of the icons can be decorated with our J buttons and the things like that, like how the things need to be decorated because the swing components and everything, they are the one that used to do the stuff. Let's go back to the another review that we have here for the basic, like I know like for the programming languages, the identifiers and the reservoirs and the white spaces, like how does that means like white space are usually ignored, but if we have some white spaces between our variable names and your declarations, like let's say we have a variable name like ABC space XYZ, that's an illegal. We need to have a specific variable name that need to be start with an characters or an underscore followed by any alphabets or an numeric numbers or underscore. Compilers and the interpreters, like the compilers is usually that used to compile your code, and the interpreter is that one that converts your code to an assembly language. There are the three kinds of errors we know, usually the syntax, the runtime, the logical errors. The syntactical errors is the one that won't allow your code to run, whereas the runtime error is the, let's say, if you are running your code and your code gets the segmentation fault. Right? So it's a kind of a runtime error that's happening, or maybe you are running something and your file is not found. That's the runtime error. Though maybe the logical error comes is when you are doing something and you're getting a result, but it's not the one you are expecting it. It's a kind of a logical error. So then we have primitive data types. Yes. So the primitive data types are the basic data types we have, like the int, float, your char. These are the primitive data types, and the arithmetic operation is the one that we comes with our modulo operators. We have plus signs, plus minus signs, and all those things. When we have an expression that's combined all of these statements or ternary operators, these expressions makes an expression. We use them in some statements, like including a semicolon. They becomes a semicolon, like the next statement. That's what the system compiles. And input output is the both when we have a standard files and we have one Boolean or maybe your standard input outputs or the Boolean expressions. For the control flows, we have basically if else ladders, and then we also have the switch cases. So the main difference between the switch and the if else is the one that if else they can jump. If they need to go to the end, they need to go into the one flow. The switches can jump from one point to another point, whereas the if else, no, they can't. They need to be going to one flow. The another switch in the control structures we have is the for, the typical for, that is a for int I is equals to 0, and it's like we have for int I is equals to 0, we have I less than 5, we have I plus plus. So this is my one of the typical loop that we have. There is another one that we says for the enhanced one. So that one is we have for string s colon, we have, let's say, before that we have Arraylist string. Remember, the string is a class, so we specify, usually go for the class name capital. List list string is equals to new Arraylist I did list dot add ABC. I have here XYZ element PQR. So if I go for here S, so it is kind of like if I am did this thing here like above, and instead of this thing 0, 1, 2, 3, this is becomes 4, and I am here accessing string s is equals to list string dot get 0. These two loops are the same because one of them is an enhanced, the another one is the typical one. The difference between is like this Java is doing the things for you, they are automatically doing the this s and it is storing everything in there. Here we need to get and typically s and it is going to store in there. The another one we have is the do and the while loops. That's similar than the normal ones that we usually use. Then we have using a classes, like how to create a class in an object is like using the things like here I created an object using the new keyword. The new keyword creates an object. The methods, like constructor needs to be set up, how the constructor needs to be done. The string class, yes, the string class contains your concatenation. So let's say if I have here ABC plus XYZ, so the output for this thing will be ABC XYZ. The scanner class, it is usually helpful when we are scanning the things either from a file or from a particular stream. That's where the scanner class comes into play. The math class contains most of the math functions known as the pi, your exponents, your power functions, and these of things is being a part of your math class. That are the basic math functions that we usually use. The random class is one of the favorite class that is being used most often. That randomize your function, that seeds a function, and then you can generate the random numbers or the random decimal numbers depending on the need or choice that you want. Then here comes the arrays. The arrays are the basic arrays. Let's say it's like I have here int or maybe that string. Here I says str underscore array is equals to new string. I need to specify, let's say I'm saying like say 2010. So what does it do is it makes an array of strings that has right now nothing in there of like tens. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we have 9, 10. Now we have 10 of them, so it creates things like that, and then we can store the things as much as we want. it says the dynamic allocation of the strings, like the arrays, the dynamic, how they are dynamically allocated is like using the new keyword. We remember that these things and these things needs to be same until unless we're using an interfaces like or the some inheritance. A subclass can contains your superclass, but it's not like the other, the vice versa. Like if we have A extends B, then we can have a B where is equals to new A. That's possible. It's also possible B where is equals to new B. That's also possible, but having an A where is equals to new A, that is possible, but it is not possible where is equals to new B. It is not possible. Like me?
Yeah.
All right. Is it fine?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So that's not possible to do the stuff like that. And if we go here, we see we have an array list and the things like how to use the access on the elements. Like if we want to use the access of the elements, let's say this, I can directly use here my string array of, let's say if I want to use 0 or maybe I want to use 9. I cannot go more than the 9 because it's the size of 10, so it's the size -1. So the better thing in the array list, then there comes the collections. That's the array list and the arrays. The difference between the array list and the arrays is the arrays, they are specified that they cannot be more than 10 or maybe 100 or whatever you set here, but the array list, they are more dynamically. So let's say if I added the 10 names here, it says ABC, ABCD, EFG, HIJ, something. And now I want to add some other name over here. It's not possible in the array list, in the arrays, but in the array list, yes, I can add some things. Like whenever I do the arrays list like this, we did in the very first beginning, it assigns an array list of the basically of the 10 arrays, and the rest of the thing is being implemented in the way like if I'm adding something, it is okay with those things, like whatever amount of things I'm adding into that, that's fine with that. Now defining a class, if we are defining a class in there, we need to define either the class is public or the private. Let's say if we have a public class, we need to specify is this class and static or it's a normal one. I will go for the public class, the basic one, ABC. And now that's a fine definition of a class. I need to specify like if there is going to be a constructor, I can create a constructor. It needs to be public. It need to be have a same. It doesn't need to be have a return type, but it need to be have a same name as your class. And the parameters is the list that defines the how your class differs from your different type of constructors. If there is something, and I have here another constructor, let's say. I have here a variable name as private, int I, and I set here int I. Now this is the sharing because here I and this I are the same thing. So what I will do here, I will call this dot I. So it means the object it has been called, that I is equals to I, and let's say I have here j and I have here int k. So that's one of the normal thing that we do. J is equals to k. I can do here this dot. Now I want to call it another constructor. I cannot call this because it's going to be loop again and again and again. The same thing I can call here, let's say 5, 8. That's fine because it is going to 5 is going to be saved into the I and it is going to save into there. So we are calling the same constructor in there. The scope, the private and public says like if I have an object here ABC, A is equals to new A BC. So this thing is going to do the things the same way this constructor is called and this one is called. And how I can do, let's say if I have a web thing here, public print I'm here doing system dot out dot print line I is equals to plus. So we are concatenating the things here. And this is J, this is J, but this is my public print and I need to be specified, need to be void or what. Let's say I'm saying it is void and there is no return type in there. So I can call it here a dot print and things like that. But let's say if we have here a static member, public static function that says system dot out dot print line hey I am static method. So if it is a static member, I don't need to create a verbally one. I can simply do abc dot static method. Or even if I want to do that, I can also do that this thing in the same way a dot static function. They both are the valid way to do if it is a static method or not. The inheritance and the polymorphisms is the one that comes in the play when we have your like when we extend some things, we have a superclass and we have a subclass, like in this such scenarios. My B is being extended by the A, so B is a superclass, A is a subclass. In the same way, we can implement multiple interfaces. Interfaces are implemented and the classes are extended. The exceptions are really needful. Like, let's say if we are doing something, if someone throws a 0, we cannot rely every time on if and else. Like if this thing is I, hey, just print that you cannot divide something by 0. We need to have an exception handling that throws an exception, like saying, hey, this cannot be an illegal operation because if you do that, that is going to give an error and things like that. So that's how the exception handling is much more useful. So it's kind of a basic program we need and test. Like we need to have a public static main. That's main because we can call then test.main through our compilers. That's how the compiler runs your code. Like that's how the Java knows how to run your code. Then we have the declaration of the variables that we went over, like how the variables need to be declared. The Boolean expressions, like these two are the Boolean expressions, that means AND and the OR. We can have a short circuiting in there, which means the AND says if this thing is false, then don't compute the next one because this is going to be false anyhow. But if this thing is true, then you need to compute the other one. Whereas the OR says if this thing is true, don't compute the other one because the output is going to be true anyhow. This is known as short circuiting. Whereas if this thing is false, you need to compute the second one. Maybe if true, compute the true one. If else, go to the else. We go for the if else, while, for, and the do. Usually by the Java coding practice, in the coding ethics, the class name usually starts with the caps capital letters, whereas the function or like method names start with the small alphabets in the camel case thing, in the camel case letters. Here the t, which is an int, is going to be implemented or itself into a string, like it is going to be run and saves the strings, like how the t is going to be saved. It is implicitly turning everything into a string, whereas in this one we are using a constructor or the method known as the t.toString that implements everything into a string. The compare to compares an object, that's an object of a method of a string that compares two method or two objects. Like if they are same, then it says returns true or 1, else it returns 0. The static versus the instance. The static members needs to be, it need not to be have an object to run those things, where the instance needs to be have an object. Visibility, the private, public, and the protected, and the package private. So the public, it can be accessed through an object or anywhere, like let's say if we have a class, it is a private. It needs to be accessed only in that file. If it is nothing, then it's package private. Then it can be accessed anywhere in that package. If it is public, it can access by any of the packages throughout your world, and whereas if it is protected, usually the classes are not protected, like it is going to be inherited by the another class. The member variables is going to be accessed only if it is protected. So the polymorphism is a code expression that invokes the methods depending on the types of the object that has been used. It is going to be the subclass. It is going to be have a thing, and how it is going to be used. So the mod specifier is like this is the restrictions. If we have a public, this member is for the current object. It can access anything in there. It can access public, protected, default, private, any of them. That's fine with it. But whereas the subclass can only access the public and the protected. The package can access the default. Default is actually the package private, so it can access even one more step. That's the package private, public, protected, and nothing else. Where the general world can only access the public things. Instance of checks, like let's say if we have an object, and so here, if we have A extends, not A, C extends B, and here D extends A. So if we have something, now I check here for such scenario, I can check here where instance of, so this will tell me, like if I use this operator, like if it is an instance of that, it will tell me if it is an instance of A, B, or C, or it's not a method, it's an operator. Instance of A or B or C, it will return me true or the false depending on the things. Yes, it will say yes, it is an instance of A. It will have to go for B. Yes, it's an instance of B. If I go for C, it's giving me false. No, it's not an instance of C. That's how it's going to run and do the things. The interface is a kind of your prototypes. It gives you what need to be implemented in a class, like what are the basic functionalities in there. Like if there is a class that has all the things, all the classes, your stuff, that's how your class needs to be implemented. It doesn't have any definition, it only has your signatures, whereas the abstract based class, the abstract class says your class cannot have an instantiation of that class. So let's say if we have an abstract class A, means I can never create an object of that class. I mean, I cannot. I'm sure like I won't never instantiate that class to someone else. Like I cannot do new A because A is an abstract. Exception handling, one thing, you cannot have a try without any catch. If you have a try, you need to have a catch to catch an exception. If try is throwing something, there should be a catch to catch something. So try and the catch blocks, they usually comes into the pairs. Then it comes to the enumerations. The enumerations is the one we have for, let's say we have the clubs, diamonds, hearts, and the clubs. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4 is goes things like that. So apart from that, let's go here. There was one difference in the abstract class I want to tell. So we have here abstract, public, abstract, class A. I go for here, do some stuffs here. Now I am extending here public class B extends A. It's the same way. I have another class known as C that extends A. Now I know, like, for the damn sure, I'm never going to do A is equals to new A. This thing is not, I'm never going to do this thing because this thing is going to give me an error. But I'm going to do here A is equals to new B. That's fine with it. It's saying, yeah, you can do that because B can be instantiated because B is not an abstract class, but A, yes, it is an abstract class. It cannot be done the things like that. And let's say if we have here public interface ABC, I say here I have here public void XYZ I have an interface, I have another interface PQR, and I have here element. If I am extending something, I can also implement let's say I am implementing ABC. If I am implementing something, I need to have all the methods overridden that I am using that. So that's my public void XYZ. Here they don't need to have a definition for that. They need to only have a signature. But here if I am doing the ABC, they need to have some definition here. Also, if I can implement more than one thing in one class. So I have an ABC, I have here another interface that is known as PQR. So this time it is implementing two of the interface. I will override the both methods in this thing. That is So this thing is in here. And if this is for the ABC, I have done everything the ABC is requiring, but there is still a problem. I need to implement everything the PQR is required, that is to override this function that's stated here. Apart from overriding, an interface can also have your, in some integers, let's say we have int I, let's say I have some public final int I is equals to 5, and so here whatever it is, it's going to be implemented everywhere in there. One of the most common thing, like if you don't handle the exceptions, Java do implement the exceptions for you, but it's not necessary that the exception it will handle for you. You won't be able to understand the things, like where the problem is happening, where the thing is going to be wrong. You need to be maybe more extra cautious in such scenarios. These overriding methods is like we are overriding a method, like let's say we have some method here, public void print something. So it is going to print saying string s1. I would say here system dot out dot print line something is s1. That's fine with it. Like if it is printing something, if I am extending this A class in here and I want to do some changes, I can do here, I want to override the same function with the same signature, but here I am doing system dot out dot print line s1 is something. So it is printing something else this time. But even if I want to do public void print something string s1 int I, in such scenarios I can do here system dot out dot print line something is s1, and then I say system dot out dot print integer is I. Yeah. So here we have done the constructor or the function overloading, and as well as we have also overridden the method with the same type, because we don't want to have that thing. We have made some changes in there, but as well as we have done here the system overloading and how to set up the things in here. Apart from system overloading, there is also some differences between the parameters. Like here, if I am calling this thing, I have here, as I know my B is a public class, I said here B1 is equals to new B. So not here, I said just B1. I have here some methods known as public, some method where this thing is happening. B1 is equals to new B. Now I can do here B1 dot print something. Hello, my name is Aakash. If I go for it, this thing will print the simply S1 is my name is Aakash, whereas if I go for this thing and I print apart from that, number 5, so the first statement will print something is hello, my name is Aakash, and the other statement will print first of all this, and then in the next line it will print integer arrays number 5. And that's what it is going to print, and it is going to save in there. So that's how the string is going to be done, and it is going to be implemented, the this dot operators and things like that, how the instance variable is going to be implemented, your array list, the collections, yeah, and the dynamic memory allocations is the usually what we do is to allocate the memories. So for let's say if we are working with the 2D arrays, let's say if I have here int I, int array 2D, so I'll write down here. I usually go for this one. That's much more convenient for me to see. And let's say I write down here 5. So this needs to be 5. I can say new int 5. And then I can loop through it for int I is equals to 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus, and I can do here array underscore 2d is equals to new int 5 and this array of I. This is all you can do for the reason. How you can do the arrays in the 2D arrays and to manipulate the strings and everything you want to do in here, and the allocation of the syntax. You need to be careful for the syntax, how they need to be run, implemented. The white spaces is one of the most crucial things that is going to be for the exams. And if we go for let's say the swing classes and the implementations like we have done before, like for this of a class, we need to be specified like these kinds of boxes we have is usually kind for the box layout. In the border layout where it says we have a particular border, how it is going to be started. This is my north, this is my south, this is my west, this is my east, this is my center, where we specify the layout like this is going to be on the particular borders on the extreme ends. That's how the border layouts works. And even for that, we have our floor layout that says that is going to be in the one floor, irrespective their size can be matter bigger or the smaller. They usually auto wrap the things depending on the things you want to do. You can do those things in the one way, you can do the things in the multiple ways. We also have this thing as a grid layout where it goes first like the grid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is also like in the grid layout you can specify that's a grid box layout. In which you decide which kind of the grid is going to be the bigger or the smaller, and the things you can manipulate. The middle one I want to be a bigger one, the upside I want to be a smaller, and they need to be manipulated in the way. The J frame is different than the J menu bar. The J menu bar has your J menu items, in which the J menus and the J menus have your J menus items, and J menu items can have the more sub items in there depending on the requirement, how you implement them and how you manipulate them to be done together. So for every project you need to do for the J swing, you need to specify separately for the J menu bar if you are using them, and how you need to be implemented. And for every J menu bar options, you can set you want it to be enabled or disabled. There is one more kind of things that you have your radio buttons, you have your the checkbox buttons. So it's like J menu bar, and I think so it's not connected to internet. So it's J menu bar. So the J menu bar contains the things like you need to have specific components for them, like they contains the J menus, and each J menus contains your some certain actions, or you want to add another component that's in another J menu, you want to add another J menu, or you want to add any J menu item in there. If you have a J menu item, you want to add another J menu action or the action listener, like what the action listener you want to do for it. Like each action listener, you need to have a specific time, like a specific task, how they need to be implemented or things. Apart from the J menu items, there is like the action, like a radio J buttons. That's the J buttons. like how the J buttons needs to be. Like the buttons can be a checkbox or the radio box. The difference between is like you can disable ones, you can enable one, or you can set the default, like you want the middle one to be set as a default. You can say, hey, I want to disable this one. You can center the position, like which one do you want to do. Apart from that, you can also have the buttons that is not meant to be, like they are the default buttons. So you can set default using the set default method that sets this one, like set one button as a default. Even though you can have these kinds of buttons that can have multiple of them, that's a checkbox. Each class can have a multiple checkbox, but each radio buttons, the radio buttons is this, like you can have only one radio button out of them, or you can have two different things, like you can have many radio buttons out of them. They cannot be like multiple radio buttons, but yes, you can have mix and match of all of those things, your radio buttons and your J classes. Apart from those things, if you go for here, we have the Oracle websites that's really helpful for the Java queries and the things we are implementing. And we have, let's say, if we are talking about the JFrame, we have the quotient, like the three components in the Java swing. So most three components is the if you go there, the three main components we have is for the align, like the actions, like the JFrames, menu bar, like for the each JFrame we can set the title, like hey, I want to set the title for this thing, like the JFrame. Let's say so if we have a project, we divided a project, like first we go for the client, then we go for a dealer, and we mix match the things. We can set up the things depending on the menu bar. We can set menu bar, we can set the item, we can set a glass panes. We can update, like if we want to hide something, we want to add something, we can set up the things depending on the things we want. And the exception handling is the one of the most things. Exception handling in Java. I usually go for tutorials point or the geeks for the geeks. That's really helpful for me. If you go for the exception handling, there can be errors. Like most of the exception handlings, they are the throwable exception, the error. If they are throwable, if they are error, the system throws itself directly. If it is exception, you can check, like if it is that, don't do that. You need to have more things, like you need to check if there is something. If you do that, it returns an exception because there is null in there and you're trying to print it. Like this is the Java returns an exception to that. But you can handle your own exception. Like say if you divide something by 0, if you do, you had tried something. If this thing works, then all right. If not, it gives the number of exception format. If that doesn't work, you divide it by zeros, and it says here that these things you're trying this compute divisions. If it is done, then you're printing the get access message, and what the message was that it cannot divide by the 0. And even there are the different types of the exception handling that you can look. Like most of the exceptions are the inbuilt, but you can also define your own exception handling. There is the arithmetic expressions, there is the array index out of the bind exception, class not found exception, file not IO exceptions. These are one of the most useful exceptions we have. Or whereas for the null point exception, you can set up the things that like the file not exceptions, but you can also create your own exceptions. Like you have created my exception, but you have to extend the exception class, and depending on those things, you can have a count number, names, and let's say we have made an exception, like if this thing happens, do that, and create an object like If there is something catch, print the trace, and things will happen on the things, like your own exception you want to handle in your way. And I think so that's all for today, and I wish you all the best for your finals, and hope you will get better in the finals then.